Hi, I'm Jay Hurst. Keep an eye out for a new episode of The Devil's Lettuce every Monday, where I'll interview industry professionals and like-minded people who are leading the way in the cannabis industry. Australian expat Saul Kaye is CEO and co-founder of iCan, a leading Israeli developer of cannabis-based formulations, clinical trials and cannabis testing. iCan is powered by Cannatech, a global medical cannabis convention aimed to accelerate cannabis innovation. Saul, thanks for being a part of the Devil's Lettuce podcast. Could you elaborate on that intro and let the listeners know how you got into the cannabis field?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Saul. I'm originally from Perth, Australia, and then went to pharmacy school at Curtin University and then Sydney University, where I graduated. And then I made Aliyah. I moved to Israel over 20 years ago, and I've been a retail pharmacist here in Israel, and then I built an online pharmacy. So I've been at the forefront of regulation and change in a pretty stable commercial environment, which is pharmacy. We're known as, pretty normal people. And then sort of 4 years ago, moved into cannabis to build something, that can make a serious change in the environment. I saw early that this is going to be a massive industry, and the ability here to create value and change people's lives was incredible. So we say we're powered by Cannatech, and essentially we are. We started with a conference here in Israel that recognized that the story was wrong. Israel was focused on the legalization of the plant and free the weed and everyone's personal rights, which is a legitimate conversation. It just wasn't the right conversation for Israel at the time. So we brought something that changed the conversation to the commercial aspect of cannabis, the ability to create jobs, the ability to heal the tax revenue that can be generated, the leading example Israel has with regulation, with its approach to medical cannabis, with the research that it's done here. We sort of shone a light on that, and that gave us the ability to put us at the center of what's going on in the cannabis world, which led us into doing more and more businesses and getting more involved. So for us, it's been a sort of incredible journey to open up this opportunity and see the development over the last 4 years through the eyes of Cannatech and the emerging market and the new technology and the disruption that's happening, and be able to sort of be at the center of that's been kind of incredible.
That's an interesting story, but what was your stance on cannabis before you got into the field?
So interestingly, we were never taught in pharmacy school about the endocannabinoid system, and it was, discovered early 70s by Professor Meshulam. So we weren't taught about it, growing up in Australia. We're very much, they're taught the war on drugs and drugs are bad, etc. So I didn't have all that much exposure to cannabis in any form till I was like 18. And then since then I've been a participant of cannabis, and only recently realized its medical benefits and its use for me personally, and then saw its effect on my mother for Crohn's and patients that I treat for epilepsy and Parkinson's. And I started to have more patients that are interacting with this chemical, and that changes a lot of things. And the perspective no longer in Israel is that it's a bad drug. It's very much another tool in the doctor's arsenal, in his toolkit of something that can be used in cases where other things have failed. And I think our next journey and the next message we're going to change is that we can make it first-line therapy and not last-line therapy. And when that happens, I think we'll have full normalization. But right now, for me, it's been, patients over time that have seen it and the incredible benefits that the plant can give. And for me, that creates a business opportunity, and I'll look to capitalize on that.
So what is iCan?
So iCan is a holding company of a portfolio of companies that we now have in the cannabis field, realizing earlier on in my career in cannabis that I didn't want to grow cannabis. I didn't add anything to the agricultural element of cannabis. I do add a lot of value in the pharmaceuticalization, in the messaging, in the branding, in the distribution, and that's where I want to be active. So we looked for the gaps in the current cannabis world, and we try and fill them through our activities in our daughter company. And that's why we have a formulation and product company, we have a testing company, we have a clinical trial company, and we have the conference company. So that as a portfolio is iCan, and there will be more. We're looking to build out a couple of new things in 2018 that are very exciting. And that's iCan. It is how to connect the cannabis world through the Cannatech engine by the movers and shakers of the cannabis world come to Cannatech. It is the best networking environment for cannabis in the world. And that's saying, competing against MJ Biz in Las Vegas, where there are 18,000 people, I'd still prefer to go to Cannatech, where I'm going to meet 1,000 people, and they're all people that matter. So that has always spawned the ability for us to get new ideas to fruition, and create new companies and opportunities, specifically in spaces that aren't being done yet, or that need a spot. There are glaring holes in the cannabis industry, and everyone is growing cannabis, and everyone is processing cannabis, and everyone wants to be a retailer of cannabis, and that's all wonderful. And I just prefer to stay where my specialty is, and add value in the deals that I do, so that I can create something that is monumental.
That's right. I think it's a smart move. Is iCan only in Israel, or do you consult worldwide?
So through iCan, I've come to consult now for the EU Parliament, for the Gibraltar Parliament. I've spoken at most conferences in the US. I'm pretty up to date on cannabis worldwide news, and I keep my finger to the pulse, so I know what's going on. So I do that kind of work. My main goal at iCan, though, is to disseminate good information to create good business opportunities. And that's really what we're all about. And we do that in a different way, and it's an unusual way, but it seems to be a way that is resonating pretty well with the public. We have a very good reputation and a good image, and we do a lot of work on our social image, and we have become leaders in this industry, and I want to be able to shine a light on why Israel is special, and it really is. So we are definitely an Israeli company, and our focus is how do we take that knowledge that we have in Israel and disseminate it to the world, and how do we commercialize the products being created in Israel or the research being done in Israel in order to help patients everywhere in the world. So it's an Israeli company with a global focus.
What's the cannabis scene like in Israel?
So it's a very robust medical cannabis market. There are 33,000 patients. In comparison, Australia has, I believe, 9 patients. I don't know, I've heard also 900 patients. I think that's a lot.
Yeah, I heard 160 the other day.
There you go. So it's somewhere between 9 and 900. Israel's got 33,000, and we grow at about 3,000 patients a month at the moment. there are 400 requests a day to the medical cannabis unit at the Ministry of Health. They're completely flooded. They're underwater. They are behind. The regulation is about to change where a doctor should be able to prescribe cannabis like any other restricted narcotic medication, and you'll go to your pharmacy and they'll dispense a Schedule 8 narcotic drug called cannabis to you. That reform is meant to take place in January. I'm hearing news from the Cannatech, where I'm one of the advisors, that's our parliament, that might be slowed down. I think if that happens, there might be riots on the street. There is just so much awareness in Israel on cannabis. It's a small country. We're only 7 million people. We're all family related in some way. So we have 2 degrees of separation in Israel. So someone knows someone who is on the medical program because of cancer, because of nausea associated with chemotherapy, or epilepsy, or Parkinson's, Crohn's, autism in kids, PTSD, which is obviously a strong component of a stressful life in a country surrounded by enemies and a population that is forced to go to the army. So PTSD is allowed and is an issue that made awareness around cannabis more aware, I guess, in Israel. So that's kind of the legal cannabis scene. So you have to be sick to get cannabis, and you have to go through procedurally quite a nightmare. But, at the end of the day, there are 33,000 patients who do have it. So the recreational, illegal scene in Israel is very robust as well. It's not uncommon to smell a joint being smoked on the streets of Tel Aviv. There is a policy of decriminalization coming into Israel, where it's going to become a fined offense and not a jailable offense, which is a blessing, I think, for the country. I think we spend way too much money. The last estimate I heard was 1 billion shekels a year. That's about, I guess, 350 million Australian dollars a year on incarcerating and chasing cannabis crime, which is a crazy amount of money to prosecute people that have a plant, or buy a plant or sell a plant. So I'm glad that's coming to an end. There are lots of supply of illegal cannabis in Israel. It's not that difficult.
Okay, what's the Cannatech convention and what can people expect to experience there?
So, as I said before, Cannatech kind of brings together the thought leaders of the industry, the ones that are looking forward. We try and bring disruptive technologies that are either pivoting from other industries. So last year we brought a company as an example who are a very, very big Israeli drip irrigation company called Netafim. And we brought them to show how they've operated in regular agriculture and how it's affected crops like corn and soy and wheat, and what they would do in cannabis, because for them it's just another crop. So we're not like a conference where you'll come to see lighting company after lighting company after trimmer company and a few advocates and a couple of legal companies. Like, that's not the vibe. The vibe is very much around the networking, the content, and then the people that are in our expo have disruptional technology. So last year we had a company called Sea-Doo, who have created a home agricultural refrigerator, grow your own cannabis plant that is incredibly teched up. And we showcase that. This year we're going to have conversations around cryptocurrencies and cannabis and how that intersection is happening. We're having conversations on what's happening, obviously, across the world in cannabis, but specifically How does medicalization as a policy lead to legalization as a policy? That will be a focus. The science and cutting edge stuff coming out of Israel is always a focus. But it really comes down to, first of all, we're on the beach in Tel Aviv, which is an incredible place to do a conference. And we have movers and shakers and leaders of the industry all within a few 100 kilometers from Tel Aviv here in Israel. So it forms the core and the base to something incredibly special.
Yeah, so this convention is something that innovative people would love.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the seed genetics, so we want to know what's coming next. We look at tissue propagation. How do we get sterile, non-pesticide-free, toxin-free cannabis at its core as our beginning material? Then when we're looking at agriculture, we look at what are the best growing techniques, what are the best environments and microenvironments that we want to create for our specific end products, which are medically focused in our case. Then we look at the production. How do you take that agricultural raw sourced material and turn it into medicine? Because part of my philosophy on cannabis is we shouldn't be smoking it. That is inefficient, and it's not a medicine if you smoke it. At the end of the day, we don't smoke any other medicine. You're not going to recommend as a doctor or a pharmacist, smoke a joint 3 times a day and tell me how it goes. So I look at the markets developing out of the flower of cannabis should be directed more to the recreational and the fun markets, and there you can enjoy your flower. I like roses better than I like lilies. And there everyone can have an opinion and everyone can enjoy it. But when we're talking about the medicalization, then let's look at data, let's look at science, but not slow it down so that our patients have to suffer in the meantime. So that's kind of all my focus, and we try and bring that vision into Cannatech, obviously on the beach, and look at all portions of the science of cannabis, including media. How does media affect cannabis? We can't advertise on Facebook and Google. We won't be able to use Uber Eats to do our cannabis delivery. So we're also developing all these new technological tools that in the normal world are sort of dominated by certain players, that we have opportunity in cannabis, for cannabis delivery apps and for home grow systems and for media and affiliate marketing. These are all the education platforms. All of those type of things are also showcased at Cannatech because they're disruptive. So that's Cannatech.
So you invest in cannabis. So what do you look for when investing in that industry?
The first thing is the team, and then what has the team done? That's probably more important than their current idea, because the cannabis industry moves really, really quickly. So unless you're, in this industry, I'm looking at really early stage companies, usually that are innovative, that have disruption in technology at their core. And I know a lot of people will say that, but, I've been in the startup environment here in Israel for 20 years. This is my 8th startup. So I really look less about their current idea, more about how do I add value to that through my network, through my distribution, through my partners in multiple states in the US, in Canada. We're looking at, doing stuff in Australia. How does that add value to this enterprise? And then is the team able to execute on it based on their previous experience? If you're coming to me, and this happens a lot, and you want to set up a grow opportunity and you have a master grower who's been growing cannabis in his basement for the last 6 years, I got no interest in that. To me, that you have no cannabis knowledge. Your master grower who grows in a small environment in his basement has no cannabis knowledge about scale agriculture. Cannabis should be grown by tomato growers because tomato growers are focused on yield. Cannabis growers are focused on how pretty their flowers are. So, everyone needs a dose of reality. So if I can add value, if your history, you come from, a tech background and you built this app, but now you're pitching me on a cannabis grow because you're really excited about growing cannabis, that's not interesting. If you can use your background and your history to leverage and add value to this industry, then bring me an idea and I'll look at funding it. That's what I'm sort of after. So team is important. Can you execute? History is, do you have the knowledge and core base to be the new entrepreneur in this digital age? And then what is your idea? Because maybe your team and your thing, you're not, you might like your idea. Maybe your idea can be molded and made better. That's what I'm looking for.
Could you share a story of how you've witnessed the effects of cannabis treatment?
I can, but I think I want to share a story of how I witnessed people misusing and abusing cannabis treatment. So I've seen it work on epilepsy kids. I'm treating patients that have chronic epilepsy, 300 seizures a week, and I've had it reduced to 2 seizures a month. And the parents, are over the moon. The kids are making incredible improvements in their life. They're interacting with their brothers and sisters. They're growing and they're playing and they're just fantastic. So that's a great story. A particular patient was a patient in Ireland that had to move to the Netherlands in order to get medicine. And the reduction is just incredible. Ava's doing really, really well. But the story I actually want to tell is the misuse. And it happens actually a lot when you get given cannabis for something, or you're treating a condition with cannabis, and I give it sometimes, I take it sometimes, it does this to me, it does that to me. It's very much not approached as if you were taking your same chemotherapy medicine. I've seen horrific side effects of chemotherapy, and patients continue to go in and you get it and you're on your schedule and everyone takes it. It doesn't matter how I feel. It makes, you're set on the end goal and not on the next few moments of how I feel. And all of a sudden, people come and get cannabis, and it didn't do well for me one time, so I stopped it. Right? The approach to cannabis is very much like the approach to all other medicine. It takes time to figure it out. It takes time to get your dose right. There are going to be side effects because there are side effects of all medication. So if your expectations are cannabis is going to be miraculous and help you with seizures today and tomorrow I don't have seizures, that isn't a reality, and it's something that people should be aware of. You need to be committed to your treatment as much as you are committed to your treatment with other medications. And I think that is something that could maybe be more impactful for listeners, is this is a treatment and there are side effects, and there are 1,400 different strains, and each strain has a different effect. So when you hear cannabis, it's almost like saying, well, I'm on antibiotics. Well, which one? Which antibiotic is helping you for what condition? Which microbe is the one that needs to be eliminated? So we need to be able to define cannabis a little bit better. And outside of also indicas and sativas, we need a better way to quantify its use and effect. And that has to be a journey that patients are willing to go on. Do not expect that you're going to get a tablet and it's 5 milligrams, and 5 milligrams is going to work like this because that's how pharmaceuticals work. This is not the cannabis that we're creating.
What's a cannabis-related resource or tool that you can recommend to listeners, and why?
I'd have to point you to iCan's website, israel-cannabis.com. We have a tab up there called Re-Education. That's probably the best place to start in terms of if you don't believe cannabis is a healing plant and has properties that you want. And you know, if you're still a believer that the world is flat, go to israelcannabis.com and we'll convince you that the world's round. There's a lot of really good speakers. On our Cannatech site on YouTube, you can go and see all of our previous speakers at Cannatech. You can learn from Dr. Dedi Meiri, who's doing cancer research here in Israel. You can see Professor Meshulam. You can see Bruce Linton from Canopy Corp. And really get to know and see some of the people. We're much more TED-like in our style. There's, 15 minutes, 18 minutes of a deep dive to get to know one of the personalities inside cannabis. So you can get a lot of knowledge there as well. And you can always email me and ask me, and I'll try and find some time to find you a paper or a relevant video or something in our arsenal that we can help, find the information.
Okay, cool. What vision do you have for medical cannabis in Israel and for Australia?
I think my vision, as I said before, is there is a split between medical and recreational. That doesn't mean that one has to happen and the other doesn't. I think they both have to happen. But I think they're different. And I think that by separating them, we have an opportunity to maybe do them concurrently rather than one being a lead to the other. I think they both have to happen. But my goal is that we have dosable, repeatable medicine available to patients sooner rather than later. And if that means we have to give patients flower in the meantime, then let's do that. Let's understand that there has been no harm proven with cannabis. Addiction has pretty much been disproven. Yes, there may be dependence. There is no addiction to cannabis. We are seeing less driving accidents in cannabis legal states. We're seeing less teenage cannabis use in cannabis legal states. We're only seeing good things coming out of this new movement and revolution that's going on around the world. So there is no point in slowing this down. There is only a point in speeding it up. And I've met with many politicians from Australia, including the Premier of New South Wales, the Premier of Victoria, the Health Minister of New South Wales. They don't understand cannabis at its core. They understand pharmaceuticals and they're confused. We need better conversation. We need more people talking about it. You need to get your local representatives understanding that this is an opportunity in Australia. This is an opportunity to bring capital to rural areas of Australia. You have a great opportunity to create wealth in Australia and become an export country. But you need movers and shakers and politicians to make that work. And if everyone keeps sitting on their couch and going, hey, I really love my cannabis, but I'm not going to really do much about it, that's not going to make a change. So get up, make some noise, speak to your local representatives. That's my vision. You get this out and get it happening, because the longer it takes, the more people are suffering.
Yeah, I completely agree. Could you let the listeners know how they can follow your work and stay in touch with you?
Sure. So usually on Facebook is the best. Saul Kaye, Saulkaye. You can hit me up there. I'm on LinkedIn as well. That's sort of on the social or the business side. My website is www.israel-cannabis.com, or look up iCan Cannabis or iCan Israel. We're pretty well known across digital media. And if you ever want to shoot me an email, it's saul@israel-cannabis.com.
Thanks for listening to the Devil's Lettuce podcast. If you enjoyed this show, we'd love you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have a suggestion for a guest on the Devil's Lettuce, head over to thedevilslettuce.com.au and click on Suggest a Guest. Please do not take any information from the Devil's Lettuce or its guests as medical advice. Thanks for listening. See you next time.